I want to turn to the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. What is your view of this war?
I think when you call it a war, you're doing a disservice to the people who are having their limbs blown off by some of the most advanced technical weaponry on the planet. It is a genocide and it is disgusting. And it doesn't matter which side of the political spectrum you fall on. When you observe a genocide in front of your very eyes, you should be disgusted.
Which side is waging genocide?
The Israelis are genociding the Palestinians, and you know it as well as everybody else does.
That.
Well, then it seems like your bosses are not allowing you to know it.
What do you think of what Hamas did on October the 7th?
Why are you starting the story in the middle, Pierce?
didn't. I just asked you about the wider war. I'm now asking you specifically about Hamas.
I cannot professionally answer that question without talking about the context that led up to October 7th. Nothing justifies what happened before October the 7th, Pierce. This is the exact point. So you're talking to a man, I don't know what answer you expect from me, because let's forget the fact that I'm a Muslim. You're talking to a man who is fighting oppression to the best of his ability because he believes that the people in charge of the world are enslaving us all, to the point where I detriment my own life. I end up in a jail cell because I'm speaking against oppression.
But in terms of what Hamas did on October the 7th, do you accept that was an act of terrorism?
It's an interesting question because
once it's not really.
It is.
No, it's a very straightforward question.
Because you're the person who would have called Nelson Mandela a terrorist while he was still in jail, and one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter.
I wouldn't have called him that. For me to answer
the question, yes, you would have. For me to answer the question, I have to be very professional, Pierce. For me to sit on the outside in Romania with no personal involvement in Israel-Palestine, it's easy for me to say yes, it was an act of terror. However, if I was in Gaza, if I was in an open-air prison, if my family had been annihilated by bombs from the sky, if everybody I knew had suffered the loss of a loved one, if I had no chance of any kind of freedom or democracy or standard of life, would I believe it was an act of terror, or would I believe it's an act of resistance against oppression? You have to be very careful how you answer these questions.
So what do you think?
I think I understand what happens when you take people and put them in such an inhumane condition. For anybody to sit and say that you're going to take people and put them in absolutely inhumane conditions and give them no standard of life, and they're not allowed to ever fight back, or they are terrorists.
But I can agree with you.
Anyone who does that is an amateur.
I can agree with you that the plight of the Palestinians for many decades has been absolutely shameful.
So what did we think was going to happen, Pierce?
No, nothing justifies what happened on October the 7th.
So what are they supposed to do?
Nothing.
So what are they supposed to do?
That was an act of medieval barbaric terrorism. Nothing justifies it.
Did they suffer acts of medieval? Did they suffer acts of medieval barbaric terrorism before that date? Yes. And it's unfortunately an eye for an eye in this world. Let me go back to my first point when I said you're peddling asininities. The reason I said that is because to look at a situation, no matter how heinous, and to ignore all of the context and pretend that you do not understand why said situation happened.
I just want to ask you one more time. Is what Hamas did on October the 7th an act of terrorism?
I think, Pierce, it is peddling asininities for you to pretend that enslaving people...
You sound like Jeremy Corbyn.
No, let me answer the question.
15 times he refused to answer the question.
Let me answer the question.
You're now up to about... refusing. You're now about 3 or 4.
If you
are they a terror group or not?
They're one team's freedom fighter, and they're deemed a terrorist
What do you think?
I think that if you lock people in an open-air prison and steal their land, they're going to retaliate.
So they're not a terror group?
I think they're going to retaliate.
They're not a terror group?
One team's terrorist is another team's freedom fighter.
Okay, we're now up to about 8. Are they a terror group?
And also, another thing I want to make clear to you, Pierce.
Only Jeremy Corbyn has done this.
Done what?
Refused to answer the question. One more time, is Hamas a terror group who committed an act of terrorism?
I think that when you lock people in an open-air prison, you're going to have to expect retaliation.
No,
because I have to... There's people who are... First things I want to say, Pierce.
If you don't mind me saying, I think it's spineless.
Sure.
I do.
That's fine.
You sound like Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, that is an insult.
Did you see my interview with him?
No.
Right. 15 times last week, I asked him the same question. 15 times he prevaricated and wouldn't answer. Eventually, when someone does that enough times, you know what they really think.
Okay.
You don't think they're a terror group.
Well, let me answer.
You don't think they're a terror group.
No, what I think is this. On certain
Because I'd be really curious what you think an act of terror is, if you not admitting that was an act of terror.
Well, let me answer the question for the final time. I am a realist. And as a realist, sometimes you do not come to the conclusion of labeling good guys and bad guys. The world is not black and white.
Hamas are bad guys.
No, the world is not black and white. The world is actually very gray. Anybody who sits and thinks there's clearly a good guy,
there's nothing gray about what Hamas did,
and clearly a bad guy does not understand how the world works. And as a realist, what you do is you look at scenarios and you understand why they happen, how unfortunate they are, how unfortunate the loss of human life is, how innocents are dying in a chess game played by the elites. You would not advocate Russia doing any of the things to Ukraine that Israel is doing to to Palestine. You would not sit here.
Russia has been doing exactly that.
Russia has not done a fraction of the things to Ukraine that Israel has done to Palestine. A Hamas rocket, a tiny Hamas rocket that can make a pothole in the road, and then they get hit back with cruise missiles. Let me ask you a question. Ukraine sent a drone and it hit the Kremlin. A drone attack, it did nothing, it damaged some shingles. If Russia decided to then respond with a missile attack on a hospital and annihilate 800 people,
it has been.
Do you think that would be allowed?
That's exactly what it has been.
Would you advocate for that?
Have you seen?
Would you support that reaction?
Have you seen the state of Mariupol, which they leveled to the ground?
The Ukrainians did level it, you're correct.
No, the Russians
2014.
The Russians leveled Mariupol.
And my question to you is, would you advocate those reactions? Let me ask you another question, Piers. This is a genuine question. Let me ask you a question, because I want to understand your point of view.
It's actually my interview of you.
Yeah, but you tried to understand mine. I just want to understand your point of view. If I believed, or if Israel believed, that one of the people in your house was a terrorist and decided to destroy your entire house and kill your entire family, would you sit and say, well, maybe there was a terrorist inside, I accept that? Or would you be enraged? Genuine question.
I don't think you can take an individual person's response.
Well, it's a bunch of individual people in Gaza. They're people, individuals with thoughts and dreams and aspirations which are being annihilated. 15-year-old girls without legs because of cruise missiles.
Let's come to that.
They are individual people. They're not cattle, Piers.
Let's come to that.
They're people. You know what's actually interesting? Because you've spoken about this subject with people who actually understand the conflict better than I do. Mohammed Hijab understands it better. Low-key understands it better. I'm talking from a very general humanistic perspective, because I don't understand the absolute intricacies like they do.
Do you know what genocide means?
Of course I do.
He wouldn't tell a million of them, as it turned out, who moved south. Now, there are arguments about whether
to attack them as they moved.
Well, some people got hit as they moved.
Oh, some people got hit.
Yes.
Some people got hit.
You know what,
You know
Andrew?
what happens?
You know what, Andrew?
Wait till it's your son, son.
You know what?
Wait till it's your son.
I agree. And you know what, Andrew? War is horrific, because you can't even categorize them as a terror group.
No, the reason I won't agree with them is because I'm a human, Piers. And please let me answer this without being interrupted. You didn't answer my earlier question for a reason, because you knew that you couldn't answer it without proving my point. The question about the fact that if they decided to cruise missile your house because they thought somebody inside was a terrorist, you would not accept the loss of your family that you have raised. You would not accept that.
Of course I wouldn't.
Okay, absolutely. So let me answer this as a professional. What's funny is I'm a humanist. Like I said,
a professional what, by the way?
The professional. Please let me answer. Let me answer.
What are you? What are you speaking? You say you're speaking to professional,
and I'm talking about this from a humanistic perspective, right? And like I said, you've talked to people more knowledgeable than me on the details of the subject. Right. Listen to me very carefully. I thought we lived in a democratic society. You just said 35,000 Hamas terrorists. And this is the thing that's most upsetting to me. This is what genuinely upsets me. Israel intelligence will say a guy's a Hamas terrorist. Has that guy gone to a court of law? Has there been a democratic process? Has he been proven to be a terrorist? No. They've just decided from their intelligence that couldn't see an invasion coming from hundreds of miles away. So this intelligence is actually it's not great.
No.
So they've decided this person might be in intelligence without court case, without any kind of democratic process. And because of that, they've decided to annihilate civilians along with him, and it's all just collateral damage and nobody should care. That is not a humanistic perspective, and that is disgusting, and any person in the West who is advocating for that is a hypocrite, because if it was turned on them, if the American government said, we think the person in your shopping mall, one of the people you were shopping alongside in the mall, might have committed a crime, we didn't take them to court, we think they might have, so we killed your whole family, get over it.
So the last time
is a clown and a hypocrite.
So the last time...
What do you expect full-grown men to do?
I'm about to respond.
What do you expect full-grown men to do when you kill all of their families and leave them locked in an open-air prison?
Respond.
You try and conduct genocide on a populace because you don't want them on land you say is yours, then you are terrorists.
It's exactly what Hamas did on October the 7th.
Exactly what Israel had did before that.
So you've literally just described what Hamas do.
You just described what Israel do. They're trying to genocide the Palestinians as we speak. And this is the exact point.
So Israel...
No, but to see here...
Hang on, so you think Israel are terrorists?
I think that what they're doing now is disproportionate and genocidal.
Is it terrorism?
It's genocidal, so I guess that makes it terrorism. It's genocidal. So didn't you say 12,000 people the Israelis have killed thus far?
Yes.
I saw a video of a 15-year-old girl with no legs begging to die.
Yeah.
She was begging to die, saying, I have no future because my parents are gone or my legs are gone.
It's horrific.
I have no future. No, but you say that, right? You talk about numbers and statistics, and you say a few people got caught. You don't think of Gazans and you don't think of as Muslims and Palestinians as individual people.
Oh, yes, I do.
No, you don't. Because if you did, you would not be happy with what's happening.
Don't you dare say that about me.
Well, okay, then don't group them together in numbers.
No,
they're not numbers, they're people.
I've spoken for many years about the plight of the Palestinian people. I think it's outrageous that Israel has any control over their ability to function with water, with fuel, with other energy, and so on, and food and so on.
That's interesting. So if you were in Gaza as a Gazan male, a masculine, fighting age, and you believed the things you currently believe,
Yeah.
what would you do about it? I'm just asking.
You know what? Nothing justifies the terrorism we
I
saw
never
in
said you'd be a
70s.
terrorist. I'm asking what you do.
No. I understand why people in Palestine feel oppressed. I understand why they want freedom. I understand why they want the same rights as the people in Israel.
Then here's a perfect...
On that we agree.
Because as a professional, when we both agree on the point that the people inside of Gaza are being oppressed and that their life is being detrimented and that they have no way of getting out,
Yes.
we as a professional...
And I do agree with that.
I understand pressure cookers explode. You're pretending they shouldn't. You're saying that they should never explode. Nothing bad should ever happen.
saying nothing justifies terrorism.
We should just be allowed to subjugate them
No,
for
no.
endless years and nothing happens.
No.
And I'm a realist to understand that pressure cookers explode.
No, you're not.
And that's what happened.
No, you're not.
I understand that pressure cookers explode, Piers.
Right. So you think it's perfectly reasonable what happened there?
I don't think it's reasonable. I think it's a shame.
Natural consequence.
I think it's a shame.
A shame. That's it.
I think it's a shame that we're living in the world now where people are reduced to basically suicide to try and fight for freedom for their families if they have one left, because they all committed suicide. Those men who did that.
Well, the Hamas...
they didn't have a chance of survival. I think when you
that's because they believe that they're martyring themselves and going to a better
when
life.
you oppress people to the point where their family's dead and they have nothing to live for.
Right.
What I support.
So why do you support Hamas?
I support justice in the universe.
You support Hamas?
I support justice in the universe.
Do you support Hamas?
Well, I don't know the ins and outs of Hamas's creed. I have to be very honest.
Well, you know what they did on October the 7th. Do you support them?
I understand why that happened. And we need a solution.
So you're
Piers.
very quick to condemn Israel's response, but you won't condemn the terror attack which prompted it.
No, I'll tell you why.
Even though Hamas knew by doing what they were doing, that would be the response.
Do you think they knew that?
Of course they knew that.
Let me ask the question. Do you think if we gave the Palestinian people basic human rights, that Hamas would find it more difficult to recruit new soldiers?
I think
probably if we treat them like humans, this won't happen. So we agree and let's move on.
I think there's a real danger in the scale of Israel's response that you radicalize a whole new generation of Palestinians. I think that's a real danger.
So perhaps,
by the way, I've said that. We can agree on that.
So perhaps it was Israel's actions before October 7th that radicalized the soldiers who invaded. So you agree with me. So let's move on.
No, I don't. Let me ask you about the reaction that you've had from certain people who I think at one stage you had a good relationship with.
Sure.
One is Jordan Peterson, and the other one Ben Shapiro. Let's talk about Jordan first.
Sure.
But what is your view of him?
We have different views of the world on certain things. I think we approach him from different places. He's far more in his mind, whereas I live in more in a physical realm than he does. I have nothing against Jordan. I don't dislike him. I do find it, and I must be honest, a bit disingenuous and hypocritical that he speaks mental strength and then ends up addicted to an antidepressant. I don't think he should ever take antidepressants ever. I've been through worse than what he's been through, and I didn't take a single drug. I just think that he's been a bit hypocritical. And then, truthfully, the only time I've been genuinely a bit appalled by any of his actions was the tweet he made on Israel-Palestine when he said, "Give them hell." But I think when you actually wish hell upon other human beings, I think it's a disgusting thing to do, because hell is that 15-year-old girl with no legs and her parents were dead.
Well, hell
you see her crying her eyes out, begging to die. That is hell. When he was wishing hell on an entire population,
he did express regret for the way he phrased
and
that
he
tweet.
should,
and
because it's disgusting. I think that he's hypocritical because of the antidepressant problem, and I think that the fact he wishes hell on other humans because he gets emotionally involved in a conflict, which within 2 minutes of it sparking off, he's wishing genocide. I think that says a lot about his personality.
Let me turn to Ben Shapiro. What do you say to that?
So Ben is a warmonger. Ben has been wrong on basically every single issue you can name. He was with you with the vaccine and every other war. Ben is always calling for other people's young men to go and die in some war. He seems to love it. I don't know if he has short man syndrome, but he's always behind his desk calling about how important it is that big, strong men like me go and die. And the reason he tweeted that and said that is because when Hamas and Israel, at the very early in the conflict, I think it was 3 days in, were discussing possible peace talks, he tweeted, "No, absolutely not, fuck them, kill them all." And I said, Ben, as a man who's done his own fighting, because I've had a life of pain and violence, listen to me. Peace is always worth a conversation. What I said is that we should always be prepared to at least discuss peace. He, because he's a warmonger, said, "No, peace is not worth a conversation. You're this, you're that, da-da." Because he's always sitting behind his desk. He must have a booster chair, and he's always running his mouth trying to invoke violence and call for war. And I find it kind of hypocritical, because a man who's so small he would die if he was slapped on the street, sitting behind a desk and screaming for other people to be annihilated, I think is kind of, it's worse than hypocritical. It's insane. That's all he does. And calling for war and defending yourself is very different than genocide. And Ben, like I said, overall, most of Ben's worldviews and mine probably align. We don't align on the religious sect, and we don't rely on the religious points. Fine. But our overall worldviews about how society should function probably align on many of the key issues. I don't have a beef with Ben, and I don't watch his show, and I have no idea what he talks about a lot of the time. But what I do know is that every time I turn it on, he's calling for someone else's son to go and die in a ditch somewhere for his interests. And I don't like people who are not advocates for peace. Blessed are the peacemakers, said Candace, who is far more intelligent than Ben will ever be. And she is completely right. He replied that rhetoric, starting an argument with me, when I said we should talk about peace. I say we should talk about peace. He calls for the death of civilians, and somehow we're asking why my point of view is seen as abstract. It's insane. Why can't we all just sit down and say the fighting must end? Why can't we do that? Why can't we sit and say, nobody should be dying, let's stop using the most advanced military weaponry on the planet to blow the limbs off children? Why can't we say that without being deemed some kind of terrorist sympathizer or anti-Semite? It's insanity. Trump came along and didn't start a single war. He's the only one who didn't. And they're going to come along him and make him a bad guy. When a new president comes in, it's just endless war and death and killing. Have you seen a dead body, Piers? Have you seen people lose a fucking limb? It's disgusting. I know what's happening over there.
Have you seen that?
I don't need to tell you about the parts of my history that I'm not prepared to share, Piers.
You've seen people...
I said it to Ben. I said people who have done their own fighting and seen their own violence and have seen people bleed out in the street from a stab wound are not going to be so smart and so quick to sit behind a desk and call for the death of innocent people. It's disgusting what's happening. I don't want anyone to die on either side. And when I come along as a peacemaker and say this is insane, because he's a warmonger, because he has chosen blinkers and sees one side of the argument and refuses to accept the humanity of Palestinians, he says I'm a bad person for calling for peace.
Well, you know why? Because he'll probably listen to this interview and say, this guy can't even describe Hamas as terrorists.
Piers, don't interrupt this. It's 2 sentences. I want all people to stop dying. However, I understand what is going to happen when you create a pressure cooker. That is my answer, and it's extremely professional. I don't want anyone to die, and because I don't want anyone to die, because I'm a peacemaker, because I'm a humanist, I understand you cannot lock people in an open-air prison for an undetermined period of time without provoking terrorism.
So out of interest, what would you have done if you'd been Israel after October the 7th?
That's a really interesting question, and I think there's people who are more qualified than me to answer.